Keir Starmer recently denied that his government has let down victims of grooming gangs who have endured suffering in the United Kingdom for years. This has sparked outrage among the public and opposition MPs, who are furious with the Labour government for refusing to launch a thorough investigation into the issue. Amid this controversy, Shadow Home Secretary Jess Phillips has delivered a scathing critique of Labour's Home Secretary Yvette and exposed Labour's failures in Parliament. Watch the clip below.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of her statement. The whole country is shocked by the rape gang scandal. Over years or decades, thousands and maybe tens of thousands of vulnerable young girls were systematically raped by organised gangs of men, predominantly of Pakistani heritage. Instead of those victims being protected and the perpetrators prosecuted, those girls were systematically failed. Many cases were covered up because of absurd concerns about so-called community relations. Police often did not investigate. Local councils covered things up. The Crown Prosecution Service frequently failed victims. And those raising concerns were frequently accused of racism. Never again can people be silenced in that way. And I pay tribute to people who have raised these cases over the years, starting, I think, with former Labour MP Anne Cryer, nearly 2 decades ago, who first raised these problems and bravely persevered, despite accusations of racism and worse, including from her very own colleagues. And let me just say, in that vein, a word on the Prime Minister's comments this morning. It is not far right to stand up for victims of mass rape. And smearing people.
Order.
It's those concerns.
Shadow. People want to hear the statement.
Smearing people who raise those issues is exactly how this ended up getting covered up in the first place. Now, I will, of course, repeat now what I said yesterday, that intimidation and threats towards elected members of Parliament and ministers, including the member for Birmingham Yardley, are completely wrong. Now, as the Home Secretary said, action is important, and the last government took extensive action, starting with the original J report commissioned in 2014 by previous Home Secretary, now Baroness May. A year later, she commissioned the independent investigation into child sexual abuse, and it was Sajid Javid who commissioned data collection in about 2018. Now, in relation to the response to the ICSA report published in 2022, it is not true to say the last government took no action. The last government established the Grooming Gangs Task Force, whose work led to 550 arrests of perpetrators in the first year and safeguarded 4,500 victims. So my first question to the Home Secretary is this: can she confirm to the House, I'm sure she can, but can she confirm to the House that the Grooming Gangs Task Force work will continue and I hope even be stepped up? Secondly, as part of the work of the Grooming Gangs Task Force, and again implementing one of the recommendations of the ICSA report, in April 2023, the last government mandated data collection in relation to ethnicity that the Home Secretary also referred to. Will she confirm? Now it's been going for over about a year and a half, or over a year and a half. Will the Home Secretary now confirm that data on the ethnicity of perpetrators will be published? Now, as the Home Secretary, of course, has acknowledged, one of ICSA's main recommendations was mandatory reporting to the police by people in positions of responsibility. Now, the last government was in the process of implementing that recommendation via a measure in the Criminal Justice Bill, which fell with the early election. Now, I'm glad to hear the Home Secretary has just announced that she will continue with the last government's proposals in her forthcoming bill, and she can be assured that the opposition will support the government in the continuation of that measure. Now, finally, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Home Secretary did not address the need for a full national public inquiry on this scandal. Now, while the last government did initiate the ICSA inquiry under Professor J. That was mainly directed at other child sexual abuse and exploitation issues, and it only covered 6 of the towns involved in the gang rape scandal. So it didn't cover everything. We do need to get to the truth. We now have evidence, new evidence of further that is of interest to the public, including what Simon Danchuk, the former Labour MP for Rochdale, said about the way he was pressured into staying silent. We have evidence about local authorities covering this up. We have the 3rd report last year on Operation Span, commissioned by the Mayor of Greater Manchester, Andy Burnham, exposing failings by the Crown Prosecution Service, which are extremely serious. This all needs to be looked into. So will the Home Secretary commission that national statutory public inquiry, which can compel witnesses to attend, that can requisition evidence, and where it can take evidence under oath? And if the government will not order that statutory national public inquiry, we will table an amendment to the Children Wellbeing Bill later this week to put the matter to a vote. And I hope members across the House will vote for that full statutory public inquiry so we can get to the truth.
Home Secretary.
But just to say to the Shadow Home Secretary, this is an issue in which, when I was the Shadow Home Secretary, when I was the chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, I worked with government ministers on, and in which there has been cross-party consensus on the need to tackle these very serious and vile crimes. This is the most appalling crimes against children. The brutal rape, the repeated multiple rapes of children, particularly young girls, but also young boys, in the most appalling of circumstances, and the abuse of trust for those children. Often it be people who should have protected them, who should have looked after them, and where institutions failed to keep them